Good morning, y'all. I didn't never say y'all, but I figure you think I'm from Texas, I have to say it, okay? I don't have a cowboy hat, but I do have boots. And I am just very happy to be here with you. I did bring my jacket. It's a racing jacket. Because I figured coming to Columbus or Indianapolis, I was the family pastor for the A.J. Foyt family. He signed my jackets. Never in church, but it was always in an outside event. AJ's, as you know, is one of a kind. Really a tough one. I just want to say how grateful I am to have the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I come to you with the blessings of Cardinal DiNardo, our Archbishop in Houston. I come to you with the blessings of the Houston community that has been really ravaged by Hurricane Harvey. I ask you to please keep remembering us. We have a short attention span when it comes to catastrophes, and we have since moved on to Maria and to earthquakes and fires, which we should. But please don't forget the people of Texas. I just read yesterday that the farmers in Harris County suffered $200 million worth of loss in crops. And the hurricane came not into Houston so much as it did to Rockport and all the way up to Beaumont. And so while Houston got a lot of attention, there are other areas that were hit every bit as badly. We had 51 inches in Houston. I never heard of such a thing. And we're still very much suffering. Over 50 parishes were severely affected. Several schools, Catholic schools, were closed. We had parishes completely underwater. Churches completely underwater. It's just hard to explain to you the magnitude of it. But I ask you to remember the victims of Harvey. So I bring to you their best wishes and their prayers. I bring you the best wishes of soon-to-be world champion. Hey! Houston Astros. For years we've been referring to them as the Lastros, all right? And they're just 2 wins away from the World Series. I'm certainly praying for them, but I have a feeling they'll figure out some way to lose this thing. But right now we're very excited about it. I would not suggest that it is a replacement for the pain that we're suffering through Harvey, but it's a help. It really is a help. So I come to you today, and I just want to say to you that I am very honored to be here. One of you asked me, as I was coming up here, Father, could you tell me what are the qualifications do you think for someone who's going to be a volunteer working in jails and prisons? And I said, I could give you a whole list. Certainly humility, infinite patience, obedience, great sense of humor. You have got to be a person of great humor to work in jail and prison ministry. But the overwhelming qualification for someone who is going to work in jails and prisons, without which I would not let you work in the jails and prisons of the Archdiocese. You must be able to sing Amazing Grace. If you cannot sing Amazing Grace, all 39 verses that seem to grow every week, you cannot work at jails and prisons. And pretty close to that, you need to sing This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine. Those are the ones. So I just want to say to you, I'm happy to be here. The talk is going to have as its resources 3 main resources I want you to maybe think about. One is the apostolic exhortation of Pope Francis in the year 2013, Evangelii Gaudium. I don't know if you've had the chance to read this. The problem with encyclicals, apostolic exhortations, whatever you want to call them, is they're beautifully written and rarely read. If you have never read an encyclical, or you figure that because they don't have pictures, they're hard to read, okay, this one is very easy to read. It's in the style of Francis. He writes in very theological, but very simple to read language. And there's so much in here about correctional ministries without ever mentioning the word correctional ministries, okay? I want you to really read this. Also, a document that you should all be very familiar with and that is the pastoral letter from the bishops. Okay, that was written about 15 years ago now, about correctional ministries, what we're committed to do as a church. The problem with this document is it's well written. I just don't feel that a lot of bishops have read it. And so when we go to the bishops addressing these issues, they look at it like, oh, well, I wasn't a bishop at that time, or I wasn't in a conference. Okay. Well, read it, read it. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And that's enough said. I'm on camera here, so I have to watch my reputation. Okay. Also, this is a new one. I just received this from my secretary maybe about 2 weeks ago. It's from the Vatican. It's a translation of a letter written in Italian when I was in prison. You visited me. It's full of quotations from the popes on correctional ministries and ministry to the poor. This is wonderful. It's called For I Was in Prison and You Visited Me. And if you haven't seen it yet, come on up and I'll show it to you. It's full of quotes from our popes. I think one thing we forget is that our popes, going back quite a ways, have always made it a point to visit the inmates in the Roman prisons on Holy Thursday, and it's wonderful to see them do that. I am very blessed to come from an archdiocese in which we have incredible support from our cardinal. The 3 bishops that we have go into the prisons, and they celebrate confirmations. And they love it. They love it. Of course, I tell them they're treated like gods when they go in there. Even the wardens show up. The wardens never come for my masses. But for theirs, they all show up and everything's done. And so they love it. They love it. I'm very proud of our bishops, and I would say that even if I weren't on camera. They're very supportive of what we do. The Diocese of Galveston-Houston we really have 51 jails and prisons. These are county jails, city jails, they're private jails, state prisons, immigration centers. You name it, we have it. It's a huge enterprise to have correctional ministries for this large diocese. We have about 60,000 men and women who are incarcerated within our diocese, of whom about 20,000 classify themselves as Roman Catholic. It's just an amazing number. We have in the state of Texas 114 state prisons. We love to put people in prison in Texas. Over 220,000 in prison within Texas. We have a huge death row. I visit when I can the inmates up in death row. I have witnessed executions, being in the death chamber with my hand on the leg of those who were executed. We do everything big in Texas. And when it comes to incarceration, that's an unfortunate quality of ours in Texas. My office as Director of Correctional Ministries is right inside the Harris County Jail, not in the administration section, right on the floor. We have 4 different buildings that comprise the Harris County Jail, and we have right now 9,400 men and women. Last year in the Harris County Jail, 143,000 people came and went. It's not 143,000 different people now. We have a lot of repeats. Well, they must like the food, they keep coming back. And so I just want to give you a sense of the scope that we deal with in Texas and in Harris County, where we have the seat of our archdiocese. So again, I just want to say how honored I am. Whenever I have the opportunity in my schedule to speak, I grab it. I've been in Milwaukee and Kansas City, and I have a couple more talks coming up. Because I'm always strengthened and bolstered by people like you. One of the main problems we have in correctional ministries is that we feel very isolated. We feel very alone. And years ago, when I brought members of the various dioceses together to form the Texas Catholic Correctional Ministries, I had an agenda as to what we were going to do. The representatives from all the dioceses sat down, and the very first thing that happened was there was a permanent deacon from Brownsville, and he stood up and he started crying. I said, well, we're off to a good start here. We already got people weeping. And he said, I just didn't realize there were so many people that were doing this. I just felt so alone for so long. I was asked by Lynn, what could you do to bolster correctional ministries for your diocese? This is one of them. You come together, you look at each other and say, my God, look at this. And you go refreshed, renewed, strengthened. You're not alone. You're not alone. And that's a real danger that correctional ministers have. We feel isolated. So that's what I want to say about that. I told you how special you are, that you are called, that you are chosen. You're very honorable. And you're also, quite frankly, crazy. You are crazy. You're nuts. You're nuts for doing this. Don't you understand that those who are in jail and prison belong there? You do the crime, you do the time. We don't need tree huggers, in jail telling everybody, you poor baby. You must be crazy. You're some of those extreme do-gooders. Don't you understand that people don't change? Once a crook, always a crook. Why are you wasting your time? Don't you understand that in parishes we're always looking for CCE teachers? We're always looking for educators in our schools. We're always looking for volunteers in the jail. And there you are, visiting these people who have never come to church. Never. What a waste. We need you in our parishes, don't you understand that those Bibles that you give out, they're just going to use for contraband? They're going to trade those Bibles for other things, to get ice cream and whatever. Give it to those inmates who want those Bibles that you've worked so hard to get into. Don't you realize that all these people that are in jail and prison find Jesus when they're in there? Jailhouse conversion. Everyone's converted. And as soon as they get out, I have 2 big barrels at the Harris County Jail so that when people leave, they can deposit things they don't need anymore. And every Monday I go down there and empty the barrels full of Bibles that we passed out, worked so hard to get. There they all are, If you haven't heard these things said about you, you will. You will. You're crazy. You're nuts. And those comments come from people who aren't bad. It's just that they don't understand what we do and why we do it. Correctional ministries working in jails and prisons is on the periphery of the church's ministry, or at least it is seen as being on the periphery of the church. Pastors say, well, I want to make sure that I have someone go visit those who are in hospitals. They are my parishioners. We want to make sure that we have youth groups and all that. And if anybody wants to go into jail and all that, that's fine. Do your thing. Keep me informed, as long as it doesn't cost me anything. Correctional ministries is seen as something extraneous done by weird people who don't have anything else to do. That's why I started by saying you're very important and very special. Okay. My mother, God rest her, she's in heaven right now, but she lives up in Connecticut. And I didn't get a chance to go up and see her very often. My sister's a doctor up there. But whenever I would go up there, she'd have to have the neighbors in, to look at Ronnie. No one ever calls me Ronnie but my mother, And, it was like whenever I would go up there and she had the neighbors over, it's like I grew acne and pimples all over again. I was a teenager again. People will come and, oh, this is my son. Hi, how are you? And I remember on one particular occasion, my sister was there. She's a pulmonary, I don't know what she does. She's a children's pulmonologist, very wonderful woman. I love her to death. She's my only sibling. And so my mother said, I want you to meet my daughter, Michelle. Hi, Michelle. She's a doctor. Ooh, she's a doctor. That's wonderful. What do you do, Michelle? Michelle would explain what she did, and I never understood what it was, but it certainly sounded fascinating. Then this is my son, Ronnie. hi, I'm Ronnie, And they would say, well, Ronnie, what do you do? I'm a priest. Ooh. What parish do you work in, Father? I work in jails and prisons. Ooh. And though they never said it, I knew what they were thinking. Like, what did Ronnie do to get on the bishop's bad side? Maybe Ronnie isn't in good standing with the diocese. There's some dark secret about Ronnie. And so I found myself assuring people that I'm in good standing. I've been a pastor of 4 parishes. I consider myself to be a blue chipper. No scandals or whatever, 45 years priest. But the stigma is attached to those who work in jail and prison, even among clergy. Like they can't fit into a parish, so let's put them in jail. It really is. It's kind of sad. And in fact, to be honest with you, I have had the chancellor call me and say, Ron, they don't call me Ronnie, Ron, we have a priest that we think would go very well in your ministry. Now, I've been around the block a few times. First response is, does he speak English? The second one is, has he ever been in prison? Not as a minister, but as somebody else. And usually it has to do with someone with a priest with a problem. Now, I'm not suggesting that's all who work in jails and prisons. It's just kind of like the stigma that goes with correctional ministries. We are seen on the periphery of the church's main mission to do other stuff. And since we as a church are so parish-oriented, and the parish is geographical, that we don't see jails and prisons as being very important at all. And so this morning, I want to talk to you about whether you want to call it the theology of correctional ministries, or why we do this, and how important it is to see it as part of the church's mission. You need to understand that when people ask you, why are you doing this? You don't just come up with Matthew 25. Now, I am certainly very much aware of Matthew 25. We all are. But some of us, when we answer the question as to why you're doing it, it's the only scripture we can quote, as if there's nothing else in the scriptures to support us in what we do. The reality is, the whole Bible describes what we should be doing, and correctional ministries is part of that. Our tradition is always about opting for the poor and going out to those who are lost and forgotten and forsaken. If you read the scriptures, that's our tradition as Catholics. We have that option for the poor. It's just that it's almost like we're apologetic. Like Matthew 25, yeah, I know that scripture. But our whole tradition is about respecting life in all its forms, encouraging people to understand their dignity that comes not from their worthiness, but because of God's grace and His love. And we need to be very clear. We understand why we're doing what we're doing. And also, we need to be very clear as to what we're going to do once we get in there. You're not a medic. You're not a lawyer. You're not a bail bondsman. You're not some of the things that the inmates say they need so desperately. And if you're not careful, if you don't go in there with a clear sense that you're to proclaim the good news and that it has great importance, and that the inmates may not understand how important it is, and that at times you're going to have inmates say, well, I need somebody to help me get out of jail. I don't need a Bible. I need this. And they do. I've been known at the Harris County Jail to go outside, go to a car, and the window rolls down, and a woman takes teeth and gives them to me. And I hold them in a napkin, and I bring them up to the Harris County Jail. Because this inmate can't eat, and he needs his teeth. Now, I try not to do that very often, I try to get them glasses. I find it very ironic that we have some preachers that say, I'm not there to give them glasses. Well, then why are you giving them a Bible when they can't read it? It makes no sense whatsoever to give somebody a Bible if you're not helping them get some glasses. There are social work things that we're going to do, but that's not what we're there for. We're there for far more important reasons. And don't let the inmates try to con you and say, no, I don't need that. I need, medical care, which they do. You know that 60% of those in jails and prisons are there for mental health reasons? 60%. The Harris County Jail is the largest mental health facility in the entire county. It's awful. It's awful. The medical stuff, I'm a diabetic. I have inmates all the time say, well, the nurse just told me I'm a diabetic, but she didn't tell me what to do with it. And so they give me a commissary list of things that they can order to supplement their food. And they'll say, Father, what things on here can I order? And I think, thank you. Nothing. Nothing for the diabetic. There's nothing there. So what good does it do for somebody to tell an inmate for the first time they're diabetic without also helping them to explain how to manage it? So I'm not suggesting to you you're never going to be doing social work things, but I'm just saying you're not a social worker, and you're not a medical person, and you're not a lawyer, and you need to go in there with a very clear mind that you have the good news to proclaim. And that good news is powerful. It's something that will truly give them freedom, even if they don't have teeth, and even if they don't have eyeglasses. When people, and I might as well end this talk right now because I'm going to give you the answer. Why do we go into jails and prisons? Why do we do correctional ministries? I'm going to give you the answer, okay? And I'm not going to say Matthew 25. When people ask me why, I say, well, I'm going to tell you why. Because Jesus tells us to. It's as simple as that. Jesus tells us to do this. How many of you are parents with children? Okay. Then you know far more about this than I do. The kids ask you questions, you give them an answer, it doesn't satisfy them, and say, how come? Why? And you go through this thing until you reach a point where you say, because I told you so. That's it. And you walk away thinking, well, that wasn't the best answer. Well, in a sense it isn't, but it's also the right answer, because what you're saying is, I can't explain it to you in ways that you will understand, but you have to trust me that I know what's best for you. And when it comes to doing correctional ministries, when it goes into going into jails and prisons, I go there because I'm called. I'm chosen. And there are many times in which, having dealt with the issues that I deal with, I say, why me? Why me? And I hear Jesus say, because that's what I called you to do. You must have an obedient spirit. You may not always understand if you're doing anything good or of any value, but the seed is planted and God will water it. God's grace is sufficient. I am always proud to proclaim the words of Isaiah. No word goes forth from the mouth of God and returns without having done what it was sent to do. But who will proclaim that word if not you? Who shall I send? Me. Pick me. You are called. You are chosen. You may not see the results of your work very often. In fact, if you work in a jail, those that you've worked with, you've got them to communion, confession, they leave and 3 weeks later they're back. And they're all with sunken cheeks. And I say, have you been using drugs? Well, I don't know. 3 weeks ago you didn't look like that. You know? I hear confessions all the time, from women who come and go like a swinging door. I've got parishioners, my parishioners, who are in their 80s. And they go into the tank and the women say, Mama! And they treat her like a king. And I say, please don't, Queen, please don't do that. Mama feels more comfortable being in jail than anywhere else. That's the sad reality. We have people who have been institutionalized because they've been in jail for so long. We have people who don't have anything better out there because you and I aren't providing anything better for them. And even while we prepare them to go out, we don't give them the tools they need to stay out. And that's a question that we really need to be honest about. The easiest part about being a correctional ministry is walking into a jail and prison and ministry. That's the easy part. The difficult part is what to do with them once they come out. And if there's nothing for them when they come out, they're coming back. And we need to be honest about that. I have 3 halfway houses. And when people say, why are you doing that? And I say, well, you have two choices in dealing with those that come out. You can either help them or they'll be climbing in your back window because there's nothing for them out there. And we fail miserably as a Catholic community. Our brothers and sisters in the Protestant communities are way ahead of us in this. They do wonderful work in doing aftercare. We're Johnny-come-latelys even in correctional ministries, much less, reintegration into society. I ask you, what good does it do if you pray for those in jail and prison, and then when they get out, you're not there for them? The church is not there for them. What have we really accomplished? When people ask me why we do this, I turn to Matthew, but it's not Matthew 25. It's Matthew 28. It is the last paragraph in the Gospel of Matthew. You know why we do jail and prison ministry? We do it because of this. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountains to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and he said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always until the end of time." It's the definition of evangelization. We are an evangelizing community. And we must understand that our mission includes those who are in jail and prison. I'm going to read you some excerpts from Pope Francis in his message on evangelization and joy. But evangelization takes place in obedience to the missionary mandate of Jesus. Go, therefore. Go. Don't stay at home. Okay? I want to make that point very clear. You and I are missionaries. You and I are missionaries. We're disciples first. We sit at the feet of Jesus and we understand what it is that he's calling us to do. And then he sends us forth. So many of our rectories have become citadels. We'll be there if the poor show up. They ain't going to show up. Those who are in jail and prison, Ron, I'm there. They only have to come and see. They ain't going to come to church. They don't feel welcome. You got to go get them. You got to go get them. I remember when I was in a seminary, we used to have a mission sending forth ceremony for our missionaries, and they get these great big crosses. I thought, wow, that is really neat. And they were going to all these foreign countries. One thing that you could do in this diocese is something that we need to do in our diocese, and that is to have a commissioning ceremony for those in jails and prisons in front of the whole community. Maybe like at a Blue Mass where we honor the law enforcement, and then those who are volunteers in jails and prisons come up for a commissioning ceremony. The Cardinal says it, we send them forth so that the whole community can say, wow, we have a ministry to those in jail and prison. The nature of the church is missionary. We are sent to go forth and witness to the good news. A couple of years ago, our Holy Father went to Mexico. And the people were all excited. From what I understand, and I have some priests who are friends of mine in Mexico, the clergy weren't all that excited. And you know why? Because they knew what they were going to hear from Francis. He was going to tell the clergy, and he did the night before, you need to get out of your rectories. In some cases, you need to get rid of your rectories. That's not where the poor are. And he goes on to say that I would prefer a church that's bruised and dirty and at times confused, because then they enter into the suffering of the poor. And a lot of the clergy didn't like to hear that because they saw themselves in a favored position. If somebody wants to see me, they come to me. No, the nature of the church is that we go to them. Have you ever seen any Catholic show up at your doorstep inviting you to come to church? Our Protestant brothers and sisters embarrass us with their real excitement about the Lord. They go door to door. Wow. We as a church tend to be introverted. We pull in on those that pay our bills, who come on Sunday. And believe me, I've been a pastor. I know how busy our pastors are. They're overburdened. They really are. I mean, I remember when I was first ordained, I would have like maybe 2 masses on a Sunday, you know, 1 on Saturday. Well, no, we didn't have Saturday then. And now you hear 5 in 2 languages. When I was pastor in St. Jerome's in Houston, we had 9 masses on a weekend, 2 in Vietnamese, 2 in Spanish, and the rest in English. And by the end of the weekend, I could not even remember my name. Much less someone says, now I want you to go into jail. Oh, no, you ain't getting me anywhere near that. Our pastors are overwhelmed. And so when I say things that are not very complimentary of the pastors, I want you to understand that these are really important men, very blessed and overburdened. But the church is missionary. And in fact, Francis says this, all renewal in the church, all renewal must have missionary activity as its goal, if it is not to fall victim to a kind of ecclesial introversion. Like, well, are you on my envelope list? If you're not on my envelope list, I'm not going to visit you in the hospital. I've heard that before, you know. Or, you know, I take care of my own and God knows they're demanding enough. I understand that. But the nature of the church is that it's missionary. And we have only to turn to the scriptures to see that. Abraham, he has to move his whole family, okay, the father of the 12 tribes. Moses, we got to get out of Egypt, okay. You have the 72 disciples. Don't hang around here. Jesus says, get out there, get out there. And it's wonderful to hear that when they come back, they can't shut up. They are so excited about what they've experienced that they would not have experienced it if they just hung around the church. Okay? Even the apostles on Pentecost, remember, they're hiding. The Holy Spirit comes, and what's the first thing they do? They practically tear the door down. We got to get out of here. And whereas, you know, history may record that the church suffered tremendous damage because of the persecutions, no, it was a way in which the church went universal. It became Catholic. We got out of there. We got out of Jerusalem to the ends of the earth. There is a wonderful statement that Paul makes in his letter to the people of Philippi. You want to talk about missionaries? Well, I'm going to tell you who the ultimate missionary was. This is Philippians chapter 2. Have this mind among yourselves, which was in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of all men. Jesus is the ultimate missionary. He is sent by the Father. In obedience, he goes, he dies for us. If we're looking for any kind of prototype in terms of those who are part of that missionary nature of our church, it's Jesus. He did not hold on to heaven as something to be grasped, but he emptied himself so that he might come among us. And not only, brothers and sisters, when we think about correctional ministries, do we need to understand that we are part of an important element of the church inasmuch as we're missionaries. We're going to lands, we're going to areas where no one else wants to go. Sometimes I think to myself when I talk to the cardinal, and the cardinal is saying, I want you to do this and this and this and this. I think, you know, Cardinal, there aren't a whole line of priests out there wanting my job. It's not like they're killing themselves to be part of my mission, you know. And in the back of my mind, though I don't verbalize it, you ought to be grateful for having me. And he is. He says that very often. But, you know, we need to be aware of the fact that ours is a thankless job to so many in the church, and an unwanted or unneeded job. We have to feel that we are called, we are chosen, that God will give us the gifts that we need to do it, and we have to trust in Jesus' words, my grace is sufficient for you. And we have to believe that God will never ask us to do something in correctional ministries that's too hard for us to do. He will never ask us to do something that's not best for our spiritual life. And he will always produce fruit. If but we have we take the risk of going out, away from people who we know, out of our comfort zone, and anybody who ever goes into a jail or prison is certainly out of their comfort zone. But we need people with that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of missionary spirit, And that's why I call you very important people, very special people. The church needs you desperately. Not only are we sent by Christ into these jails and prisons, but the primary mission of the church is to be sent to those who are poor. There is a definite option for the poor in the proclaiming of the good news. St. John Paul, in his encyclical Redemptoris Missio in 1990, makes this statement: there must be a special impetus to preach the gospel to all who are far from Christ, those who are especially vulnerable. That's a beautiful word. Namely, the sick, the elderly, the imprisoned, and the forgotten. This mission must be the primary work of the church, to go out to these who are most vulnerable. Missionary activity still today represents the greatest challenge to the church. You know, there's a word that I always apply when I'm working with inmates in the jail. They're so vulnerable. They're so vulnerable. They don't know what they want, but they want something. They want something. And that's why in the jails and the prisons, when working with our Protestant brothers and sisters, we make it clear that I'm not going to go baptize people, and they're not to do it either. And the reason for that is I can baptize somebody who I've developed a relationship with in the jail, and 20 minutes later, another wonderful preacher from another denomination will come, and the inmate will say, I'd like to be baptized in your church too. That's how vulnerable they are. It amazes me so often when I talk to those who are in jail and prison, we never ask them what their crime is. It's none of my business. None of my business. But they will open up, maybe the first time, and start telling me all sorts of confidential stuff. And I feel like saying, whoa, back up. That's how vulnerable they are. They're not used to people listening to them. And I mean listening to them and hearing them, who will hear their story and show some empathy and compassion. They're not used to that. And so we need to understand that if there's anybody who's ripe, if I can use that word, for the good news, it's those who are in jail and prison. When we think about the life of Jesus and his preaching, who received the good news the quickest and the most effectively? The poor. They had nothing else going on for them. They were being told by their priests that they're poor and that's your lot. Sorry about that. In fact, some of the priests were telling the people that not only are you poor because that's your lot, but you've done something to bring that on yourself. Your illness is the result of family members having sinned or you having sinned. And then we hear Jesus come in and say, you are of great value in my kingdom. Oh, who doesn't want to hear that? You are forgiven. Oh, you are powerful. Oh, no wonder the poor hear the good news. And when you go into those who are in jail and prison, they're vulnerable. I had somebody tell me that, Father, you're a priest, right? And I said, yeah, that's kind of why I walk around with you. They said, I've always been scared of priests. And I thought, uh-oh, here it comes. And they say, because I'm always afraid of authority. Because I was raised, for years, Father, one inmate told me, I thought my name was SOB, because that's all my father ever called me. The cops were always on my back. Whenever I would show up in court, the judge said, if I see you one more time, I'm going to throw the book. I have learned how to hide from authority. And the ultimate authority is God. If there's anybody who's going to judge me harshly, it's going to be God. And you're his representative, so I try to keep a low profile and fly low when it comes to authority. And I hear this over and over again. I never expected to see a priest in the jail. I never expected to even see a Catholic volunteer in the jail. Our Protestant brothers and sisters outnumber us at the Harris County Jail 10-1. I get all sorts of volunteers from our Protestant brothers and sisters. They really see this as their calling, a mission, and they respond to it beautifully. It's pulling teeth to get volunteers from the Catholic community. It's like pulling teeth. And, you know, and so I mean, talk about, people who say, what's in it for me if I'm going to work in jail and prison? Some people ask me that. My response is, they're happy to see me. And how long has it been that anyone has said, I'm happy to see you? Most of the time it's like, oh God, there he is again. Oh yeah, oh whatever. Here's Father. He probably wants some money, donation from me. That's the only time the Father ever talks to me. But they're happy to see me. And I thought, wow, this is cool. If you want to know what makes me happy, I can find a reason every day, even working in the jail, to stay at my desk and do paperwork. I mean, it's a big ministry I've got. And when I really get frustrated and angry, I go into the tanks and visit the inmates. And invariably, when I'm done, I come out of there and I think, oh, that felt good. They're happy to see me. I say, hey, Father, sometimes for the wrong reasons. Like, oh, good, Father, I need, and there's a whole laundry list. But after a while, and they found out that Father's not going to do that for them, I lose some of them, but the rest come and say, oh, it's just nice to talk to you, Father, and pray with you. And I have some questions about the church. It's so good to have people welcome you. And that's one of the perks of being in jail and prison. If you can look for perks, that's one of them. We are to preach, brothers and sisters, news that is to the poor, that is good news. Good news. Now, I had a nun, God bless her. I remember when I was in catechism, and I never wanted to go to catechism. I would rather play baseball than go to catechism. And I asked her one day, what do we mean by good news? Because some of this stuff doesn't sound like real good news. Like, I have to love people I don't even like. And I have to forgive 7 times 70. There seems to be no end to this thing. And so she says, well, you know what the good news is, Ronnie? And she says, it's news that's good for you. And I said, oh, I've heard that one before from my parents. Like those green things on my plate, they're good for you, but they taste like crap. And I thought to myself, I guess that's what good news is. It's stuff that's good for me, but I don't want to hear it. That's not what the good news is. It's joy. It's excitement. It's good news. For so many people who haven't heard a lot of good news in a long time. And our Holy Father, in talking about this in his exhortation, he says, there are some Christians whose lives seem to be like Lent. They never go to Easter. And I can tell you that as a pastor. When I was in Mississippi, I used to have a wonderful lady, just a really holy lady, very holy lady. She would come to confession every week, even when at times it meant that those who hadn't been to confession for like 3 years couldn't get to me because they were in the line, because this lady was always number 1. And she'd go through the list, and the list was always the same. And I was not feeling very good as a pastor that way, and certainly not feeling very pastoral. It was hot. The air conditioning wasn't working in the church. So she's coming with this list, and she skipped one, and I pointed it out. Because she always said the list of sins in the same order. She said, oh. And then she started all over again to make sure she got the list right. I said, that's not the point. That's not the point. And I asked her, how do you see your function in this community? And she said, well, I'm this. I'm one of those that's a sinner. And I really see my whole function in the church as admitting to everyone that I'm a sinner. And I thought to myself, honey, we all know you. We know you're a sinner. You don't have to convince us. We know that. I said, but this is a parish of resurrection. And in all honesty, when you're in the aisle beating yourself like this, you're blocking the aisle. There are some people who never get the resurrection because they think that because they're a sinner, they're the worst of sinners, and they don't see anything beyond it, and they see it almost as their calling. And I think you run into that a lot in jails and prisons with some inmates who say, I'm really a sinner, I know that Jesus died for others, but he couldn't possibly forgive me. I am the worst of all sinners. And I mean, I have to resist laughing. I know it's not a good thing to laugh at when somebody says that, but I think to myself, you haven't heard half of the confessions I've heard. You don't even rank in the top 10, you know? And you know, we need to get beyond that, that my contribution to the Christian community is admitting I'm a sinner. We know that. It doesn't take much faith to say I'm a sinner. Where the faith comes in is accepting the forgiveness that I know I'm not worthy of. And that requires great humility. Oh Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof. But only say the word and I shall be healed. And our Holy Father says we need to get beyond this perpetual Lent. And we need to move on to Easter. And he says, when we talk about the good news, what are we pronouncing to those who are poor? Let me tell you some of the things we're pronouncing. Emmanuel. Remember how the angels come and say, I come to bring you tidings of great news. And this God shall be called Emmanuel, which means God in our midst. Oh, wow. Because most of those that we minister to think that God gave up on them a long time ago, and certainly in jail. And then you show up. And that's why they're happy to see you, because what they see in you is Emmanuel, God's presence. It's good news to see you. I am not forgotten, to be remembered in spite of my sinfulness. Wow. If you've ever been at the lowest point of your life and felt that no one cared about you or loved you, and someone assured you, someone that you trusted, that you were of great importance, what a blessing that was. Like rain from heaven. We proclaim that even if a mother should forsake her child, I will never abandon you. Emmanuel, I will not forsake my people, no matter where they are, if they're in the front row of the church or in the last cell in jail. And that's what we're proclaiming. That is good news. We come to preach salvation, heaven, and we say you don't have to be Catholic. Jesus comes to proclaim the good news to Jew and Gentile, to everyone who seeks it. Wow. Okay? That's good news, and that's what we're proclaiming to those in jails and prisons. We come to proclaim that he's a God of mercy. It's important that we understand that when we come to jail and prison as a minister, we come to proclaim different values than the values of the world, and those values are included in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the merciful. Oh, you ain't going to see that written on a statement as to the values of this world. You're a sucker if you're merciful. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who suffer injustice for the kingdom of God. These are the values that we're supposed to be proclaiming, and these are values that really resonate with those who are poor and forgotten and who are vulnerable. This is good news to those who don't feel they have any value in our society. They've been locked away and forgotten, and the response of the community very often to those who are in jail or prison is good riddance. Out of sight, out of mind, out of mind. We come to preach the message of Jesus that all who seek forgiveness are given it. Now, I need to be careful about this when I'm a minister, because I can tell the inmate that God forgives them, but I need to be very honest and say society won't. And they need to be ready for that. Because if they think that because I'm there to offer them the forgiveness of the church, that there are going to be people out there who are going to, no. My favorite parable is the parable of the lost sheep. Like if I can put it in layman's terms, and I'm not being disrespectful, but there was a whole gang of righteous. They were Lady Fidelity, the Knights of Columbus, good people in parishes, wonderful. We couldn't function in parishes without these people. But they're having a potluck. And they need somebody to bless the food. Well, the obvious person to do that is the pastor, but the pastor's nowhere around. Where's the pastor? Is he watching The Price is Right, or what's he doing? I've always known that pastor. He's not as good as he should be. We love to complain about them. And someone says, well, he's out looking for that one lost sheep. Oh, again? Again? Doesn't he understand that we'd be a whole lot better off without discipline? Cut our losses. That's our society values, right? I mean, let's focus on those who are really into this thing and cut our losses. It's almost as a church, we want to reduce the church to like 15 people who look like us, think like us, agree like us. Wow, isn't this wonderful? Look at us. No, where the church is supposed to be expanding, 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 welcoming everyone back and teaching them that they're important to us. Well, the pastor's out there looking for the one sheep, and I would guarantee you that this is the sheep who always seems to get lost. You know, he needs a GPS, he needs something, but he's just not in step with the rest of the community. The pastor gets him, and in that wonderful, iconic vision, he puts the sheep on his neck, and oh, who doesn't have a picture of that in their house? You know, the Good Shepherd. He brings it in, and here's the interesting thing about this. In one rendition in the scriptures of the story of the parable of the 99, the community, when they see him bringing back the one, rejoice. I don't know anybody that did that. In fact, the communities I know weren't very happy to see that lost sheep back. Like, he's back again? Lord have mercy. You know, he doesn't contribute anything. But here's the key, I think, to the parable. The pastor, shepherd, pastor, understands something about the community that no one else does, and that's why he's the pastor. He understands that not only is that sheep in need of the community, but the community will never be everything that it can be without that one. That there's something lacking in the community when those that we have forsaken and imprisoned are not welcome back. They're not liabilities. They're important to the community. How many times those of us who oppose abortion, and I would expect all of us in here to oppose abortion, use as one of the reasons why we oppose abortion is that just think about how many people, how many fetuses have been aborted that could have grown up to be great doctors, scientists, and made our communities even stronger, right? Well, doesn't that same argument apply to the lost sheep? Huh? How many have we cut off and say they're of no value to us simply because they're not in step with us? And as a result, the community, which God only knows needs all the help it can get, loses the gifts that this one individual can get. The vision of the pastor is that every person has purpose and value, and that the community needs this inmate, this former inmate. We need them back. We need them back, and that's part of the good news that we proclaim. When we take a look at the history of the church, whenever someone is called, whenever someone receives affirmation as being important to the community, there is great joy. Great joy. Our Holy Father talks about that. One of the results of evangelization is that there is joy, and that no one should be excluded from this joy, because it gives them strength in times of difficulty, and it allows them to pursue things when at times there seems to be no solution to life. We need that holy joy or whatever that comes from hearing the good news, and no one should be excluded from that. He talks about, for example, the angel Gabriel. Whenever the angel Gabriel comes to Mary, what does he say? Rejoice. The angels say to the shepherds, rejoice. I have some good stuff to tell you. Okay, that's my translation, not the scriptures. I bring you tidings of great joy. I'm not laying on you some heavy burdens. Your life is already heavily laden. I come to bring you joy. Rejoice. I have been spending a lot of time, for some reason, reading the Magnificat. I have a growing devotion to Mary as I get older, as I am old. She was so special. She really is an incredible woman. For example, the angel comes to her and says, rejoice. And Mary says, okay. My translation, not theirs. Okay. And the angel, and she says, so what's going on? And the, we maybe need to cut the camera on this, okay? You have to remember, I've worked in jails and prisons for 30 years. You got to cut me some slack here in what I say and how I say it. But the angel says, I come to bring you glad tidings. You're to be the mother of the Savior. Wow. And Mary, to her enormous credit, doesn't ask a whole lot of questions. She says, I just have one question. How's this going to happen since I'm a virgin? And the angel says, well, the Holy Spirit will overshadow you. That's it? That's it? You can almost hear Mary saying, okay, I don't know how this is going to fly with the neighbors. When they see me suddenly pregnant, and I got to go tell everybody that the Spirit of God overwhelmed me, like, okay. But Mary goes on in that beautiful prayer in Magnificat, so my soul magnifies the Lord, I rejoice. I don't know how this is going to happen, but I trust in God that He'll never give me something to do without giving me the strength to do it. And then she goes to see Elizabeth. And I was reading a book by Father Richard Rohr. And he says, you know why Mary went to visit Elizabeth? I thought, no. She needed to get out of town. She needed to get out of town. The neighbors were probably saying, who is this? She goes to Elizabeth, and the baby in Elizabeth's womb leaps for joy, leaps for joy. Now, joy, 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 joy. You see this all over in the scriptures. The apostles come back, the disciples come back, they've got stories to tell. Joy, joy, joy. Jesus makes the statement, I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and that your joy might be complete. And when we hear the story of the jailer that is converted by Paul, the whole community rejoiced that he became a believer in God. The product of proclaiming the good news is joy, is joy. I mean, don't we hear in the scriptures there's more joy in heaven over the repentant sinner than over the 99 who have no need of forgiveness? We come to proclaim good news that is joyful news. And for those of you, and I know there are many of you who have worked in jails and prisons, God knows we need some joy in our prisons and in our jails. And under very inhumane situations, we come to bring great news and joy. Our Holy Father says the joy of the gospel is for all people. No one is to be excluded. And a truly evangelizing community is filled with joy. It is important that we understand that when we go into jail to proclaim the good news, we have had a personal encounter of joy with our Savior. You can't preach what you yourself have not experienced. You cannot. And you must go in there, and we all have a story to tell about how God has affected us in our lives and how He's changed our lives. And every inmate wants to tell you their testimony. And sometimes I think as a chaplain, I say, yeah, but wait, listen to mine. And I think, no, that's not what I'm really here for. I'm here to listen to their testimony. And then if there's time, I do talk about how God has changed my life. I'm here in jail and prison, not because I don't have anything else to do, not because I'm a bad priest in bad relationship with my bishop. I'm here because I've got some joy that I want to share. And when you have good news, you can't wait to share it, right? And so when we go into the jail, we bring good news, and with it comes that reality of joy. Why do we go into jails and prisons? I'm going to tell you another reason that we take for granted. All life is sacred. All life is sacred. We come to the end of this month, Respect Life Month. Do you understand that jail and prison ministry is a Respect Life ministry? When I go out to preach to various groups and all that, they're expecting me to talk about abortion, which I do all the time. They expect me to talk about children's health and welfare and all that kind of good stuff. Yeah, care for the elderly. These are all Respect Life. How about those who are in jail and prison? Huh? You and I as Catholics talk about the value of family. Well, let me tell you what happens to those who are in prison and their families. They go into jail, can't afford to bond out, so they sit for 6 months until they go to court. In the meantime, the wife has to go on welfare or has to go over to the Vincent de Paul Society because the main breadwinner is in jail. The marriage is now on the rocks. And if they get out on parole or probation, they're not even allowed to live with the family in the apartment complex, because the apartment complex people will throw them out. The whole family structure has been destroyed by this individual spending time in jail, and they may not even be guilty. And so we talk about family life. The destruction that occurs in the family because a loved one is in jail is something we don't think about. I mean, I come from the state of Texas, where, God forbid, we are the ultimate pro-life state. Oh, we love to say, we love life, we love life, we love life. Yeah, okay. When it comes to the 50 states, we rank number 48 from the bottom with regard to child medical care. We love life, okay? Number 49th in the country in children's education. We love life. Thank God for Mississippi. That's just the reality. Mississippi is like on the bottom all the time, And yet I get so tired of our governor saying we respect life. No, you don't. We've got to make sure that the fetus is born, but we seem as a Catholic community to lose interest once the child is born. And that's sad. And that's why our Holy Father says we need to be careful about this. When we're talking about respect life, yes, abortion is a major concern of ours. But what happens to the child once they're born? And there are so many other respect life issues that we also need to focus on. Correctional ministries is one of those. And that's a hard sell, when we talk to parishes and things like that. And finally, there's a term that's used in correctional ministries, restorative justice. Restorative justice. I have problems with that concept. I think it's redundant. What kind of justice is there that's not restorative? If it's not restorative, it's not justice. So we can talk about restorative justice, and I know what people are saying. It's the idea that we return them to their communities. But that is the purpose of justice, to get them back into their communities. And I think we need to be honest about this. We need to be part of their reentry back into the community. What are we doing to ensure that those who are forgiven, given the sacraments, and told that they're lovable and important while they're in the prison, and when they get out, they're completely shut out by the community? Educating the community on the importance of those who are in jail and prison must be part of your ministry. Educating the communities, and that's the hardest thing in the world, because our communities sometimes don't want to hear that. I have halfway houses, and it's hard to have them. And if you want to get a halfway house, you need to call me, and I can tell you the stories. Like, for example, my halfway house for women. Do you know who I have as directress of that? She's a nun who used to be a Chicago cop. That's the kind of person you need to be a director of halfway houses. And it's not just a simple thing like, I'm going to set up a house and have inmates come and live there. Oh, no, you better not. But our recidivism rate in the 3 halfway houses, the recidivism, those who return to prison, okay, is 7%. 7%. The national rate, 50 to 60%, and that's on a good day. It's on a good day. 95% of those who are in your jails and prisons are going to get out someday. What's waiting for them? Yeah. So, that's about all I want to say to you. I want to leave you with a thought, though. I can give you a lot of theological reasons as to why we are in jails and prisons. And they're good reasons. They're good reasons. And you should be prepared to answer people when they ask you as to why you're doing that with some of the things that I have just said. This is why we're here. We're sent by God to the poor to bring good news that brings joy. I'm doing this because Jesus said to do it. And I must be obedient. Even though, I don't know sometimes where it goes. You've got to trust God. And that's where Mary plays such an important role. Just can't imagine the obedience it took for her to say, into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit? No. She says, your will, not mine, be done? No. But that's what Jesus says. And that must have rubbed off on his mother. Your will, not mine, be done. Wow, the ultimate act of obedience. But I'm going to share with you a letter from an inmate. The inmate's last name, ironically, is Slay, S-L-A-Y. I confirmed him up at one of the Luther units. And I can give you all sorts of psychological, theological reasons as to why we should be in jails and prisons. But this is the one that means probably the most to me. This gentleman is in for 2 murders. I don't know if he is ever going to get out. I was confirmed by you at the Luther unit, and you told us all that you wanted each to write you and explain or describe what the first 30 days of being Catholic has been like and how my life has been forever changed. Okay. My life has changed in every way thinkable, and some that I don't even know exist. From that day on, I look at everything in a way that it's not about me or my wants or my needs. I carry myself differently in a way that makes me like people, and it's good to see people who need me. I am trying to give everything I can in my life to his will. But here's the best part of the letter. Now, Father, comes the hard part, that this old, uneducated country boy just doesn't have a word for in describing the effects of the Holy Spirit on my life through confirmation. I don't think it's possible to use a word to explain this feeling and emotion that's inside me and that comes out of me whenever I try to explain the Holy Spirit and my personal love for my Father in heaven. Sir, I've been stepped on, fell on, kicked, even bitten by horses, cut fingers off with saws at work. This is not a guy you want to hang around with. Beaten unconsciously and even shot in the head, and I've been declared dead 4 times, and never once did I cry, not one tear. I'm not a crybaby, not a wimp in any way, but forever God's reason is this. Whenever I talk about them, I end up crying like a baby. When I speak of what it feels like to know God truly loves me, and how much it means to me to want to be as close to him as possible. I'm talking about real, uncontrollable, big fat, boo-hoo, nose-running tears, but smiling all the same time. My life has been forever changed by God telling me how much he loves me. This is why I do it. This is why I do it. So I want to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. I could go on forever. I have a lot of advice I can give you on how to set up a ministry. But whenever I talk about the goodness of God and whenever I talk about the joys of working in jail and prison, quite literally the hairs on my arm still continue to stand up after 30 years. After 30 years. A life sentence in Texas, by the way, is only 20. So I think I'm ready for parole. But it's been the most exciting experience of my life, and I hope this morning in sharing some of these thoughts with you, I have conveyed that feeling to you. You are special. You are important. You're blessed. You're called. The church needs you, and I salute you. Okay. Let's stand up and sing one last song. No, it's not going to be Amazing Grace. No, it's not going to be. No. Okay, this is another song. This is another song, okay? I want you to repeat after me. Sing out, my soul, to the glory of God.
Sing out, my soul, to the glory of God.
His love is forever and ever.
His love is forever and ever.
That was pathetic. Go forth now and witness together. Forever. Together. All right, now, those are the words of the song, but as you well know, everything we do in jails and prison is done with attitude. Okay, you got to have attitude whenever you sing. Okay, all right? So we need to speed it up a little bit. Repeat after me. Sing out my soul to the glory of God. Lord, His love is forever and ever. Go forth now and witness together. Forever. Together. I say, sing out my soul to the glory of God. His love is forever and ever. Go forth now and witness together. Forever. I say forever. I mean together. Forever. Forever together.